there are probably more human souls in some form of modern slavery or human trafficking today than at any other point in the course of human history.
You're a serial entrepreneur. What made you decide to get into fighting human trafficking?
Sure. So that is kind of a little bit of a long story, but I got involved. I met a venture capital group out of Fort Worth. At this point now, they're out of Fort Worth, Zurich, and Singapore. But I got to know these people in 2018. They invested in one of my companies, Evidencity, in 2021, and that's how I got to know them. They're kingdom impact-minded investors. So when we went through the due diligence process, obviously there was they wanted to know business model, founders, return on investment, addressable market size, all that kind of due diligence that you would expect in a VC environment. But they also wanted to know what impact we were going to make. And as believers in Jesus Christ, they wanted to know how we were going to take the money they were giving us from their limited partners and how we were going to use that for kingdom impact. So, to get to your answer, when I met them in 2018 and when they invested in us in 2021, they had not yet got involved in anti-trafficking or counter-trafficking efforts. But by 2022, they, as a venture capital group, were leaning into the problem, leaning into looking for solutions, especially around investing capital in data and tech to fight human trafficking. So that was my experience, or maybe my introduction. They held a conference back in late 2022 that I attended as one of their founders, and basically I spent a day learning about human trafficking in the 21st century. And I was first of all, I was shocked. I was astounded. I had no idea the scale, the issue, the size, the evil, the depravity. But quickly my shock and amazement turned to resolve to say, what am I going to do about that? So as the venture capital firm leaned into it, I did with my partner at Evidencity, as we started thinking about how our data, our tech, our company could address that issue. And at Evidencity, we focus in on global supply chain transparency. And that has to do with the fact that the global economy is so large, so complicated. Nefarious and evil actors kind of hang out in that global economy, and they siphon off legitimate dollars for evil purposes. So things like child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, indentured servitude. And so a Fortune 50 company isn't in the business of supporting human trafficking, but the complexity of their supply chain going all around the world is such that when you get, 2 or 3 or 4 degrees of separation from that Fortune 50 company, that they are unwittingly supporting forced labor, child labor, what have you. So Evidencity works on global supply chain transparency to address those issues. My newest venture, also backed by the same venture capital group that they asked me to come on board and look into, is called Hotel Shield. And Hotel Shield is a little bit more direct in our aim and our mission and our fight. And that is to basically empower the hospitality vertical. So think hotels, motels, lodging, empower them to prevent, detect, and respond to human trafficking on their properties in real time. So that's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how I found myself into all of this.
So I did a PhD in clinical psychology in the 21st century. And what I was taught is that slavery was an issue here in the US a couple hundred years ago. And now the biggest issue is systemic racism, and we don't see slavery anymore. So what's the point of even talking about it? Is that right? Is that accurate?
No, I would disagree with that. So according to the United Nations, and obviously, we all have our opinions about the UN, but according to the United Nations that tries to track this, I mean, when you think about it, bad, organized crime, syndicates, human traffickers, they don't report their quarterly earnings like an SEC traded company, right? So it's a little bit hard to put exact numbers on this, but people who follow this at the UN, as well as a lot of nonprofits, governmental agencies, law enforcement agencies, what have you, there are currently, it's believed, in one form of modern slavery or another, it's believed that the number is about 50 million people worldwide. Some of that is sex trafficking, some of it's forced labor, some of it's indentured servitude. Some, there are varying degrees of it. It's all awful. It's all evil. I don't mean to split hairs, but there are all kinds of ways in which people find themselves in these horrible situations. And sometimes, interestingly enough, depending on the culture, might not even want to leave the situation. Because, like, for example, there are a lot of workers in the Middle East under horrible conditions, horrible living conditions. However, every month they're able to send back money to India or Nepal or Pakistan or other countries as well. And back home, they're a hero. They're sending back more money that is supporting not only their immediate family, but oftentimes their extended family in such a way that even though they're informed, like, hey, you're being taken advantage of, like, you should have ready access to your passport, you should be able to go and, you should be here lawfully, right? There are processes to do that. And so I don't want to get into all the ins and outs of the spectrum of modern slavery. I don't think we have time to delve into that. And I honestly am not an expert. But what I can tell you is that there are probably more human souls in some form of modern slavery or human trafficking today than at any other point in the course of human history. And you might say to yourself, well, wait a minute, that's slavery, 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, or even 3,000 years ago was a lot more common and a lot more accepted. So wouldn't there be more? Statistically or percentage wise, yes, probably. But the fact that we are 8 billion people today and 50 million, so that the percentages might be smaller, but the actual numbers of people in this situation is probably larger than it's ever been at any point in human history.
Once you get into the topic, scratch the surface, it gets really dark really quickly.
Yes.
Which is honestly one of my hesitations to get into the topic. How do you address that concern, or cowardice, if you will?
Yeah, it's a real concern, and I work with. I'm fortunate enough to be involved with all kinds of people that are attacking this issue from where they sit. So law enforcement, government, academic, nonprofits, NGOs, as well as people that I'm more closely aligned with, venture capital, and entrepreneurs and founders, right? And it can get very dark very quickly. There are briefings and discussions that I've had that are downright horrific. As a Catholic and as a believer in Jesus Christ, as many of the people that I'm involved with or associated with are as well, there's a spiritual component to what's going on. So it's not just the physical world, it's not just the secular or physical world of what's happening, but there's a spiritual element and component to what's going on. And so for those reasons that I laid out, one, some of this stuff is just really evil. I mean, it is like man's inhumanity to man at a level that you wouldn't think is possible when you live your nice life and take your kids to soccer practice and pick up the dry cleaning and et cetera, et cetera. It's an evil that is hard to comprehend at times. And then because of the spiritual element, it can get very, very dark because of that as well. So, but I go back to that conference that the venture capital group put on back in 2022. Within 24 hours, the Lord had put something on my heart. I won't go into all the details, but he had put it on my heart that I needed to do something. Back in 2022, I had no idea what that was. I still don't really think that I know exactly what that is. Here, 3 years later, I'm just trying to obediently walk step by step and figure out where the Lord wants me and what He wants me to do. And I'll try to do that, and I'll try to be obedient to that. But it is important. It is important to pray. So I pray a lot. I just among your Catholic viewers, I have a spiritual director. He is put in my hands a lot of um, exorcism prayers for the laity. I'm not a clergy. I'm a layperson. I'm just a practicing Catholic. But there are exorcism prayers that I have access to, so I pray those on a somewhat regular basis, and then I just keep on trying to walk forward and trying to make a difference, and it's hard. There's in a way, the evil that you speak of, or the really awful dark stuff that you speak of, in some ways, that's not as hard as the skepticism and the apathy that I run into. I think the skeptics, at least I can have an argument with. The apathetic are just, it reminds me of Revelation, right? Like, better to be hot or cold, but lukewarm, I spit you out. And that apathy is difficult in view of what we know and what we're trying to do. The apathy is very difficult to deal with.
From whom do you get that apathy?
From people in positions of authority and budget who say everything from, not my problem, to the problem's too big. I'm a cog in a wheel. What can I really do? And when you're talking about, Fortune 500, Global 1000 companies that are worrying about the next shareholder report or the next earnings report, and you're talking about increasing budgets in places that are cost centers, right? So there's not going to be any return on investment in terms of dollars and cents. Then yeah, it's kind of like what do you want me to do about it? Not that apathy is difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I was wondering if those Fortune 50 companies, or to what extent they really care. Do they?
I think that I think individuals at those companies care. I think the companies, the institution, the bureaucracy, however you want to, the entity, um, is we like to think that they're mindless. There's actually, so we know scripture that says you cannot serve two masters, right? You cannot serve God and mammon. Um, it's interesting in the Bible. One of my pastors once said that anytime you're reading scripture and there's an original word, right? A word in the original Aramaic,
Okay.
or a word in an ancient language that they never translated, that's never been translated into vernacular. It's really important to pay attention to those. And mammon is one. And ultimately, if you go down to the notes or you go online, do your Bible study, it will tell you that, it's money, or maybe it's the love of money. Um, but mammon is actually like a minion of the devil, right? It is actually so when you take all the humanity out of business, you take all the humanity out of capital, or you take all the humanity out of business, capital just wants a return. Doesn't care how it gets it. It just wants a return, and not the largest possible. And most businesses simply want to grow. They want to add to the bottom line. They want to add to the top line, right? And in a way, um, we that becomes an idol. That becomes a god. That becomes serving mammon. And so the individuals, I think, when you sit down and talk to them, they're not necessarily apathetic, but they feel powerless in a structure, in an environment, in a machine that doesn't care about human beings, doesn't care about anything, just wants more. So that's a lot of my own personal uh, made my own personal little mini sermon there, but that's so the individuals are not necessarily apathetic, but they feel powerless within the structure that they find themselves in.
Out of the individuals that do help, what proportion of them are not motivated by faith or religion?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that before, so I'm kind of doing some mental calculations in my head as I try to respond in a thoughtful way. Um, I will tell you that when I'm very open in my faith, both in a digital format. So if anybody finds me on LinkedIn, you'll see that the first thing I say is faith driven. I'm also very open in my posts, and that's who I am, and that's where I am in my life, and I'm very comfortable with it. But not only am I like that digitally, I'm like that in real life, right? As the kids say, IRL. In real life, I'm also pretty open about it. I don't try to force it on anyone. I don't try to proselytize, but I'm very just open and transparent about that. And I will tell you that when I meet someone else who professes to love Jesus Christ, um, man, it's a lot quicker to finding solutions together than when I don't. So my sample size, I say all that to say that my sample size is skewed. It's skewed because I know I usually have better responses, better immediate responses, and better long-term results when I'm dealing with another believer on the other side.
I ask that question because it seems to me that we're in a battle between secular humanism and theism. And I
Mhm.
think the last presidential election was a great example of that. You see that Trump brought together people from different backgrounds, but who, for the most part, shared the theistic worldview versus the secular humanism of do what you will.
Yeah, there is. I don't quote me on this. I don't have it in front of me. I think it's Peter Thiel or Peter Thiel, um, uh, and is basically there is a growing. Basically, he sees the world heading in one of three directions, right? Um, just based on number of people and the money and influence and power behind these groups of people. One is Beijing. One is the Chinese Communist Party and their view of the world, their view of their place in it, their view of human life. Um, and so that's kind of one path. Another is the Muslim population, over a billion plus, and their belief in the Prophet Muhammad and Allah, and kind of like they have their path, and they kind of have a worldview of the way the world should be. Um, and then in the West, probably kind of postmodern, post World War II, this group of individuals that kind of had this new world order of working through the UN and working through capital, democracy, secular. It's been called socialist democracy, all kinds of things, and those are kind of like it seemed that by 2008, 2010, like those were the three options, and they were the only three options. And then a man by the name of Donald Trump came down a golden escalator and said, there's a fourth way. And we'll see which one wins out, right? Luckily, as believers, spoiler alert, in the end, God wins, right? So like we know that the victory's already been won, and we know who the ultimate winner is. But within kind of this physical world, there are these very very powerful elements, and up until 2016, there were three. and Donald Trump introduced a fourth. I think it is based heavily on Judeo-Christian ethics and American exceptionalism. And it is a fourth path that a lot of people have embraced, and we'll see what happens.
You said earlier there's a spiritual component to the darkness. What did you mean by that?
Mm. So, as believers, the secular world believes in coincidences, right? And just kind of like odd things and weird things that happen. As a believer, I don't. I believe it's all part of God's plan. And so, when things happen, the secular world says why, right? So uh, if um, if your 3-year-old daughter develops brain cancer, the secular world says why. Why would an all-loving, all-powerful God? Why? And what I learned years ago from a good friend of mine is that why is not a very faithful question. What is the faithful question? And so, whatever's happening in your life, try to ask what and not why. So when things have happened to me, when I've stumbled, when things have happened to family members that are close to me, over the last couple of years, I'm not, not trying to draw straight lines all the time, but sometimes it's pretty hard when, again, not when you ask why, but when you ask what is going on here, what is happening here. And it's you know I know to some people this probably sounds crazy, and maybe you should put me in a padded room, but yeah, I think, I think to a certain extent, I'm under attack, my investors are under attack. um Sometimes that rolls over to my family, and so a lot of prayer. um uh, try to walk the best I can in the physical world and deal with things in reality and the physical, but always in parallel praying. So I hope that answers your question.
Is there any particular example that stands out to you of being under attack?
Um, yeah, there are a couple. Um, I'm trying to decide how personal I want to get. Um, one in particular. Some things were going on. Personal things were going on with my son. And I woke up in a start. I've always had, in fact, my wife is gets very mad at me and very jealous at me because I've never had a problem sleeping. I'm one of those people that I can fall asleep anywhere. I can fall, sometimes my wife and I are having a conversation, and 2 sentences in, I'm asleep. And which, yeah, anyways, I have no trouble sleeping. And usually, like, through the course of my life, no trouble sleeping until the alarm goes off, right? Very rarely do I get woken out of a sleep. And in this case, something was going on with my son, and I woke up in a start, and I felt surrounded by evil. Um, it was dark. I mean, not just literally dark because it was the middle of the night, but it was dark, and it was thick, and it was kind of all around me. And I prayed for about a good hour straight, and including over my son, who was asleep. And I don't know, maybe he'll watch this. He doesn't. We've never even talked about it, so it is a little bit personal. But yeah, prayed for about an hour straight, and then all of a sudden, and especially towards the end, prayed a lot to Mary, which in again, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but if you read some of the Vatican supported exorcism teachings and articles and what have you, they'll tell you that the Satan absolutely is terrified of our mother. And so a lot of that hour was spent praying to Mary. And then all of a sudden, just as quickly as it came on and woke me up out of a sleep, it was gone. And I fell right back asleep. then so yeah, there's a little bit personal, but there's an example.
Let's pause here for all the listeners to offer a silent prayer for David and his family. I just had an image of Our Lady smiling at you when I was praying there. So keep up the good work, David.
I greatly appreciate it from you as well as from your listeners. Prayers are always welcome.
So you talked about a major challenge. Jeez. And I believe you, man. I mean, the devil doesn't take days off. And who's he going to be attacking? He's not going to be attacking the apathetic guy. That guy doesn't need anyone to help him on it to be apathetic. He's going to be attacking you, people who are the game changers. And
I don't want to elevate myself here. So I don't believe that's what you're doing, but just to be clear to anybody listening, I'm not trying to elevate myself here. I am just trying to faithfully walk like step after step, and it's hard and I fall, but I just try to get up and take that whatever step I feel the Lord is leading me to, just try to take that and keep moving forward.
Well, I think that's wise, man, because the biggest ally of the devil is pride, right? So especially people on the front lines, biggest challenge is staying humble. And that's, yeah, we're going to fall if we're not striving for that. So respect there. So you mentioned a challenge. Could you share with us some successes?
Sure. So there are a tremendous amount of, great individuals that your listeners have probably, never heard of, or maybe they've heard of them, but they're not, um, not fully aware of like some of the battles that are going on, and the war is raging, but it is important sometimes to just stop and take stock of some of the successes we've had. So I'm involved. One of my investors is Tim Tebow. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know Tim through his college football days, his NFL days, now his foundation. Um, um, so I work with him through his platform and through his bully pulpit. I've met a tremendous amount of people, and he's been a driving force as well as my venture capital group in creating some ecosystems where we can come together and we can talk about the darkness, we can talk about the ideas, we can talk about moving people and capital and bandwidth, but we can also celebrate the successes. So I'm going to kind of share some of those. One of which that your listeners might not be aware of, but as one of my friends talks about, Pornhub is not a platform and it is not a business, it is a crime scene. And for years, they did nothing. Well, no, that's not true. For years, they profited off of statutory rape videos. They profited off of non-consent recordings. They profited off of all kinds of things. And over the last, just over the last 6 months, Pornhub is in big trouble for good reason. They have finally cleaned out all of their files. And I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing to think how many files, how many images, how many videos that they had created over the years. But they finally cleaned out all of that. In some places, they're actually completely offline. And again, because the company that was created, Pornhub, as well as the private equity groups that came and bought it and spread it, were creating were involved in illegal activity, and no one seemed to care. Speaking about that apathy, right? It's like governments didn't care, law enforcement didn't care. Well, I know the people who did care and kept caring when no one else did, and kept fighting and kept sharing. One of the another success that recently happened that your listeners can Google is have them Google the Take It Down Act, which just passed. And again, this is non-consensual, or what's called revenge porn. And you might be saying to yourself, like, why am I talking about video? Why am I talking about digital? Why am I, like, aren't you working on human trafficking? Aren't you working on modern slavery? And the answer is it's all interconnected. In order for someone to become a victim of human exploitation, right? Whether it's human trafficking or a one-off or what have you, if someone is involved in human exploitation, you need to have access to them, right? They need to be vulnerable, and then you need to go about in some way coercing them, right? Now, sometimes that is, and again, sorry for your listeners talking about such, serious and dark things, but, sometimes that's an actual, like, kidnapping, um, um, by force, right? By actual physical harm and hitting, or threat of knife or gun or what have you. But sometimes it's simply access with grooming, right? Access with breaking that person down over a period of days or weeks or even months, right? With so when you think about and so that's why I talk about some of the wins in the digital world, because the digital world, the proliferation of our ability to communicate, the proliferation of our ability to reach out and touch anyone in the world, that is providing evil people more access, right? And access that if it was the 1960s and someone was trying to talk to your 10-year-old daughter at the playground, right? Someone there would have said, "Hey, who's that guy? Why are you talking to her? Why are you offering her an ice cream cone or candy or what have you?" In the digital world, all of that can happen right under our noses, right? And so, there are a couple of examples, and then there are also a lot of people I know, both in law enforcement as well as outside law enforcement, who become deputized, that bang on doors, knock down doors, look for survivors, look for the evil people perpetrating this stuff, arrest them, get them prosecuted appropriately, and hopefully in jail. So there's a lot going on that people are not aware of, and it goes back to where I started, which was shock when I learned that this whole world existed back in 2022, and I started doing my own research, getting into the statistics and everything, and saying to myself, how did I not know about this? It's there, but you have to look for it.
That whole pornography industry is so dark, and that's what the parents and children don't understand when Jonathan Haidt talks about this underestimation of the digital dangers on social media and smartphones, and how that's so much more dangerous than the physical dangers of letting your child walk to the park.
Yeah, I know some great people, again, using capital, data, and tech, but great people trying to create, healthy phones, right? It's like we used to have phones, now we have smartphones. Now we're starting to realize that these smartphones are bringing all these unintended consequences, right? Of screen time, 24/7 access to all kinds of, evil things through the internet. Um, and so, but what they found is that people don't want dumb phones. They don't want to go back to a dumb phone that's just a phone. But what they are open to is a healthy phone, basically a phone with locks on it that says, like, we won't download that app, right? Like, you have bought this phone because you said you wanted to be healthy. So there are white label apps and there are healthy apps. And then there are apps that we have considered, and it's your choice. But if you buy this phone, you're not going to be able to download these apps.
What's an
So,
example of that?
Techless
Oh, yeah.
is one company that's working on this.
They make
I
the
also
Wise phone, I believe.
yes,
Okay.
and I also have some friends in the UK. I won't mention them by name right now, just because they're in some great conversations with uh, you know they're in great conversations with the two major um, manufacturers of smartphones. And
Yeah.
so one is here in the United States and one is in South Korea, and they're in discussions with both of them. And I'll just, I pray for them, and I hope they're going to I hope they're going to have great success.
Great. Well, I wanted to take advantage of your extensive business experience before we end. Could you just share with us maybe 3 takeaways, learnings from your past business experience for any entrepreneurs listening to this?
Sure. Um, so number one, um, relationships. Always put relationships first. It's hard. It's a long game. Um, sometimes it sometimes it takes forever to pay off. Sometimes it never pays off, or at least maybe doesn't pay off in dollars and cents. But all I always try to emphasize relationships over transactions. Um, that would probably be one. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but over the course of my life, I have found that, you know, focusing on the transaction might make a difference this month or this year. But focusing on the relationship just, continues to bless you. So we were created, obviously we were created in the image of God. We were created to be in relationship with God, and we were also created to be in community and relationship with other. And so in whatever you do, focus on the relationship. The second point is, to focus on faith over fear. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people in business or in life in general, they look at things, through the lens um, of a zero sum game, right? And a zero sum game leads to fear, and fear leads to bad decisions and bad actions, bad thoughts, bad decisions, bad actions. Focus on faith, and realize that our God is a God of abundance, and that whatever you can dream for yourself or think for yourself or think for your company, um, God can think bigger, right? But in order for that to happen, you have to put him first, right? And I'm not preaching the prosperity gospel, the false gospel of prosperity gospel. I don't know what the Lord has in store for you or any of your listeners, or I really don't know what He has in store for me. I just know that, by putting Him first and by putting faith first, versus fear, that's the right way to go, and life is much better that way. And then the third thing is, I came to entrepreneurship rather late, um, in age. Usually, entrepreneurs are, the young men and women, maybe early 20s, maybe early 30s. Maybe they've had some experience and strike out on their own. Maybe they're doing a side hustle. Maybe they go to MBA school, and at MBA school they meet a couple other people and start something. I came to it late, and as I and then part of the reason I came to it late was I never thought it was possible for me. I never thought that was me. Um, and it's possible for anybody. It's possible for anybody. I mean, I will say that we could go into a longer discussion about like what I think are the characteristics and the capabilities and the skill sets that you need as a founder or a founding team, we could dive deep into that. But I would say, those conversations are immaterial unless you believe that it's possible for you. And, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but at least be open to the idea. In some ways, I wish I'm very happy on the path that I took and where I am. But in some ways, I think to myself, man, if I had started at 24, like where would I be? But that's okay. I am where I am, and things are good.
So for the values-based entrepreneurs listening to this, we got 3 lessons from David here: relationships over transactions, faith over fear, and it's possible for anyone. David, is there anything else you want to share with us?
No, I really appreciate the time, appreciate your podcast and the chance to share. I guess I'll take that back. I have one thing to share. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, and I love one of the things that I do on the side right now is I consult and work with founders and startups and young small businesses. It's something um, uh, that I hope to get back to one day. I was actually doing it, and Hotel Shield came along, and I had some investors that wanted me to dive into this, and I'm blessed and happy to be doing so. But that consulting and that advising is something that I hope the Lord will let me get back to one day. But in the meantime, I'm easy to find, and I'm always happy to talk to someone. 30-minute call and just say, hey, what are you thinking about? Let's bounce some ideas back and forth, and again open up that relationship that may never turn into anything, or could turn into something great for both sides. So I'm always open to that.
Thank you, David.